My best friend is starting to scare me. I was about 13 years old at the time. I lived a relatively normal life with both my parents. Our green two-story house sat on a quiet suburban street in the quiet town in Pennsylvania. The neighbors on my block were very friendly and social. If one of them were outside, we would greet one another. A neighbor we would usually see out is the man who lived a house away, Lee. Lee lived with his wife, Janet, and they would spend most of their time gardening. It was always inevitable seeing one of them working out on their front lawn. Their yellow, 1950s-style house with a carport driveway was always buzzing with activity from the couple. My father lived a few houses away from them as a boy. He said they always kept busy and that their house had not changed much since. My best friend, Daryl, lived across the street with his mom, grandfather, and brother, Brian. We both went to the same school and would often hitch a ride with Brian, who already had a license. We had 1 or 2 class periods together but would see each other at lunch. Most weekends we would hang out, mostly playing video games or making trips to the library. I know, sounds lame, but it was within walking distance and we would often check out comic books or books for our school projects. We knew it was a really good day when Brian would be home and would drop us off at the movies or the mall. If we weren't hanging out, we would text each other, chatting about what was going on, the stupid shit we found funny or dreading school the next day. Both my parents worked, my dad being a police officer and my mom worked night shift as a nurse at the hospital. So, I would spend most of my time talking to Daryl through a headset or texting if he wasn't able to come over. One evening, I was home alone. My dad had already left for work a little before I got off school, so I had the house to myself. I played video games in the living room and talked to Daryl on the headset. A loud, heavy knock at the door nearly made my heart jump out of my chest. I set the controller down and made my way to the window next to the door. I peered out the blinds to see a police officer standing on the front stoop. I cracked the door open and greeted him. "Good evening, do you know if your neighbor in number 6 is home?" 6 was about 2 houses away and a kind old lady named Lorraine lived there. I shook my head no and the officer thanked me before walking away. I went back to gaming. The following days were uneventful, just going to school and playing games after homework. Things started to take a bit of a turn that Thursday. I woke up and waited on the stoop for Brian and Daryl to pick me up, but they never showed. Some time went by and the garage door never opened. I figured Daryl must have overslept or was sick, so I walked down to the end of the street and waited for the bus. Daryl usually texted if he wasn't going. Again, maybe he overslept, but I was able to take the bus and get to school in time. By lunchtime, I sent my friend a message saying what's up. I hadn't heard from him for the rest of the day, which was different. Even if there were days he wouldn't feel like texting, he would at least reply until I took the hint that he didn't feel like talking. Each class we had together, I would ask the teacher if I could take the work he missed home for him. On the way home, I shot Daryl a text saying that I had the work he missed and that I was going to drop it off. No answer. I got home and walked across to his house. I went up to the door and knocked. After waiting for about 3 minutes, I tried the doorbell and waited another 3 minutes. I reached into my pocket for my phone to see if he sent me any messages, but there were only ones from my mom. I opened the hanging mailbox next to the door and slid the folder of schoolwork into it before heading back. My mom was off, so we ate and spent the evening together. Before bed, I checked my phone to see no response from Daryl. I thought I would have seen an okay or thanks from him, but that wasn't the case. I rode the bus to school again, still not hearing from Daryl. Part of me was starting to get annoyed, but I was also starting to get concerned. I figured I wouldn't bug him that day and went on with my day. After school, I got home in time to see my mom off to work. After she left, I walked across the street to give Daryl the work he missed that day. I couldn't quite pinpoint it, but something felt off as I walked across to his house. It didn't get any better when I opened his mailbox to see the work from yesterday still in it. I contemplated knocking on the door but ultimately decided against it as I didn't want to be annoying. That evening, I would make myself comfortable and play video games. I had no concept of time as I became extremely involved in my game. I grew tired of playing and let myself get killed off. I checked my phone to see it was about 10 o'clock. A notification caught my eye. I flipped open my phone and clicked the message box to see that Daryl texted around 8:47. Hi was his only response. This made me a little aggravated, but deep down, my anxiety started to grow. Maybe he was in some serious trouble or has some kind of explanation. How are you? I typed back. After about 4 minutes, he replied, good. Why haven't you been in school? A minute passed. Sick, did you get your homework? Yeah, are you feeling better? No. There really wasn't much conversation. Daryl wasn't the type to write out a novel of a response, but his one-worded answers seemed off. Will you be back on Monday? I questioned. No. The conversation died as soon as it began and I was left with more questions than answers. Not feeling tired anymore, I decided to play my game just a little more. 1 o'clock rolled around and I finally called it quits. I had grown quite tired and decided to go to bed. Before climbing into bed, I noticed a light on across the street at Daryl's. Curious, I tiptoed to the window and peeked out. It was the upstairs bedroom facing my house. This would have been Brian's room. The blinds were drawn but I could see the shape of someone pacing back and forth. I stayed there watching for about 7 minutes as the person continued walking back and forth. I muttered what the fuck to myself as I crawled into bed. I woke up forgetting about the night before, but it dawned on me once I was fully awake. The day was uneventful. I spent the day in front of the TV or on my laptop. My mom was off again that evening, so we hung out and watched movies. Once it got late, my mom decided to retire for the evening and I hung out on the couch. I had my laptop, so I stayed up playing on it. Around 1 o'clock in the morning, I felt a vibration coming from the couch. I pulled my phone from under me. I had received a text from Daryl. Shouldn't you be in bed? It read. Unsure what to think, I sent him a message back saying WTF. The lamp in the living room was on, so maybe he noticed that. I got off the couch and walked over to the window. I peeked through the blinds and saw a light on upstairs. This time, the silhouette of a person was visible. Not walking back and forth, but just standing at the window, staring at my house. And at me. It didn't move at all. I stood there for about 5 minutes watching back, and whoever it was didn't do anything. I had had enough and went to my room, creeped the fuck out. I peeked out of my bedroom window. I shit you not, the person in the window was still in the same spot. I couldn't take it anymore and decided to turn my phone off for the night. Before I could hold down the power button, another message popped up. I can see you. A sudden wave of paranoia came over me as I dropped the phone and jumped into bed, covering my head with the blankets like a child. I had the worst time trying to fall asleep and didn't sleep until early in the morning once the sun was up. I felt watched. I didn't touch my phone all day. I avoided it like the plague and spent as much time with my parents as possible. I don't have any fear when my parents work the night shift, but tonight I did not want to be left alone. I spent most of my evening planted in front of the television. I didn't feel much like playing video games, so I stuck to flipping through the channels. I felt my eyes become heavy and laid my head down to rest my eyes. I fell asleep on the couch, and when I finally woke up at around 10 or so, I decided to go to bed. I don't know how long I was out before my phone rang. It was super loud and made me jump. Groggy and rubbing my eye, I picked it up. Hello? I muttered into the phone. Silence. Before I hung up, I could hear breathing on the other end. I once again asked hello and heard myself echo. Whoever it was hung up. I assumed it was a wrong number when I noticed the caller's ID. It was Daryl. My gut told me to call him back. Why would he call me this late? Wanting to get to the bottom of whatever was going on, I called the number back and waited. As I awaited an answer, something caught my ear. I heard the faint sound of a ringtone coming from somewhere. I sat up trying to listen up to where it was coming from. My stomach knotted up when I realized it was the guest room right next to mine. Just then, someone finally answered the phone. The deep, raspy voice of a man answered. You're not alone, before ending the call. All the blood drained from my face and nausea hit me like a truck. I felt the urge to vomit and didn't know what to do. My brain told me to lock the door, but my body refused. As I sat in shock, I heard the creaking of floorboards and something snapped in me that sent me running to the door. I locked it and then moved a nearby drawer against it. I heard the sound of a door opening. Footsteps walked out and across the floor of the hallway and stopped at my bedroom door. Whoever was on the other side tried the doorknob. When he found it locked, I heard him say, come out, wherever you are." This made every hair on my body stand up, and he began to pound in the door. The thud against the door made me collapse. The intruder violently banged on my bedroom door. I crawled back against my bed and felt the phone I had dropped. With trembling hands, I dialed 911. The intruder began wailing as he violently clobbered and kicked the door. His babbling was incoherent and almost inhuman. I don't think I've ever heard any person make the kind of noises he did. An operator finally picked up and I explained what was going on. She stayed on the line and tried to keep me calm, but by this time I had pissed myself and was all but hyperventilating. The wait for the police was the worst, as I feared this psychopath could come into this room at any minute. I crawled to my closet and hid in it. The operator reassured me the police were on their way. I had to put my hand up to my ear to drown out the man's insane shrieking, which had only grown louder. I begged the operator to help me. The police were only 2 minutes away and I prayed they would come sooner. My vision started to blur and I had to put my head between my knees to stop me from passing out. Just as I expected the door to come crashing in, there was silence. I waited for what seemed like hours in the closet, expecting him to come into the room, screaming. But nothing happened. He was just gone. I don't remember much of what happened next because I blacked out. I remember hearing a police officer calling for me and feeling safe at that point. He explained that the other officers were searching thoroughly and that my parents were on their way. I was never so happy to see my parents. They were scared and my mom would not let me go. We found out that the man had escaped before they arrived. They checked all around our street but found nothing. The neighbor, Lorraine, was found dead the night the policeman asked if I had heard from her. She was found decomposing in her house. The police discovered her headless body full of knives in the living room. Upon further investigation, they found her head in the attic. And as for Daryl, his entire family was butchered. The person I saw staring out the window was the body of his grandfather. I was spared most of the details and I honestly think that's for the better. According to police, the man hid out in Daryl's house after murdering the old woman. He killed Daryl's family while they slept and lived in their house for a few days. Both homes were wrecked. Flipped over chairs, torn open furniture, 1 or 2 broken TVs. The only thing stolen was Daryl's phone. It wasn't long before my family and I moved to another state. The killer was never caught and the case still remains open to this day. The man they were looking for was never identified. The only way they could assume it was connected was because of the violent manner in which he murdered his victims and the destruction of the homes he hid in. He snuck in, committed his horrible deed and then slipped away into the night. I spent countless nights having nightmares and hearing his awful screams. After many years of therapy, coping, a self-defense lesson here and there and moving in with my fiancé, I think my life is trying to finally return to normalcy. Well, I thought that. Until I got a call the other day. The number looked familiar, but I ignored it anyway, thinking it was a spam number. And then it clicked. It was Daryl's cell phone number.